because I was going to ask you if you received advice, instruction, or request from anyone at the White House to direct the department to engage in any investigations, prosecutorial actions, including decisions not to investigate or prosecute anyone.
I'm not going to discuss any conversations.
But then how about the Truth Social post on September 20th, 2025, in which the president said, "We can't delay any longer, Pam," using your name, "not bringing criminal charges are killing our reputation," his words, "and credibility." And then goes on to tell you to prosecute a member of this committee, to prosecute the Attorney General of New York, and to prosecute James Comey. Do you consider that a directive to the Justice Department?
Senator Klobuchar, President Trump is the most transparent president in American history.
So given your efforts in Florida, do you agree that at least raising the age for purchasing assault weapons could reduce the number of these shootings?
Senator, first, that's pending litigation, and I can't discuss that at all. The 21 is pending litigation. I cannot discuss that.
Florida, okay. Is it true that the career prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia found that there was insufficient evidence to bring criminal charges against former Director Comey?
I am not going to discuss pending cases.
Senator Amy Klobuchar began where any responsible public servant should, with grief. She talked about families, about children killed in houses of worship and schools, and about what it feels like when a community is shattered. That emotional opening matters because it grounds the entire hearing in consequence. The work of the Department of Justice isn't abstract lawyering. It's about real people whose lives depend on institutions that are working as intended.
Attorney General Bondi, good morning. I'm going to start on a different subject.
Good morning.
On behalf of families in my state. And I wanted to thank the FBI and the local justice officials in Minnesota, the U.S. Attorney's Office, for the work that they did catching the murder, in the horrific murder of my friend, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband, and the shooting of Senator John Hoffman. Just last month, my state was again shaken to its core when a mass shooter attacked Annunciation Catholic Church in Minnesota, shooting through the stained glass windows, injuring 21 people, including 18 kids, killing little Fletcher, little Harper, an 8 and a 10-year-old, murdering them when they're in mass praying, 12-year-olds protecting 8-year-olds. I know we've spoken about these tragedies, and we both agree that this kind of violence, whether in Minnesota or at a Mormon church in Michigan or the assassination of Charlie Kirk, has no place in our politics or in our democracy. In 2018, after the Parkland shooting, you were Attorney General, and there was a bill called the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. And the bill banned bump stocks, enacted red flag laws, and raised the minimum age to purchase a firearm in Florida from 18 to 21. And you actually defended the law in court from a challenge from the NRA. And we know that I'm in favor of an assault weapon ban, period. I look at these bills and I think, does this hurt my Uncle Dick in the deer stand? We have a proud tradition of hunting in Minnesota. I don't think they do. But as I talked to Director Patel, and he told me in the chair you are sitting in right now, that assault weapon bans could prevent future attacks. I talked to him about better background checks, about red flag laws, and then that perhaps we could find common ground on what actually happened in Florida, which would be to at least change the minimum age for purchasing assault weapon, because we've got 18 to 20-year-olds commit gun homicides at over triple the rate of adults 21 years and over, even though that wouldn't helped in Annunciation Church because he was a few years older. She was a few years older. But as you know, the shooter at Parkland was 19 years old, and the shooters in Buffalo and Uvalde were both 18 years old. So given your efforts in Florida, do you agree that at least raising the age for purchasing assault weapons could reduce the number of these shootings?
Senator, first, that's pending litigation, and I can't discuss that at all. The 21 is pending litigation. I cannot discuss
in
that.
Florida?
But if I could go back
I really
the
didn't know
21
this.
age is pending litigation. I can't discuss that. But Senator, back to what you said about what happened in Minnesota, there is no place for that. And I believe I spoke to you after that horrific, those murders. And I'm so sorry that happened. And all of my federal agencies were partnering with state agencies, working hand in hand in Minnesota. What I can tell you about the Second Amendment is this is the most pro-Second Amendment DOJ in American history, as you know. But we want to keep guns, as you said, where they should be, in the hands of law-abiding American citizens, while keeping them out of the hands of criminals and gangs. Since January 20th, the ATF and FBI have seized more than
You gave these statistics.
30,000 illegal guns.
I have 10 minutes.
30,000,
You have given
Senator
these
Klobuchar.
statistics, and I truly appreciate those statistics. But what I was just trying to get at was something where maybe we could find common ground on a bill that you actually defended in court in a state, which Director Patel seemed open to, and that was looking at could we at least raise the age to 21 of the purchase of an assault weapon federally while states look at banning these weapons overall, given these little babies that this gun is used to kill. So we can talk about it later, but that was my question, and you don't want to answer it.
No, it's pending litigation, Senator.
Okay, but your views on this is not pending litigation. So I want to get to the independence of the Justice Department. At your nomination hearing, I specifically asked you to provide assurance to every member of this committee that the Justice Department will only follow the facts and the law, and the White House will play no role in the cases investigated or brought. You stated in response, this was you, politics will not play a part in my decisions. And you also said the Justice Department must be independent and must act independently. Do you believe that you have upheld that commitment?
I absolutely have upheld that commitment, Senator. I pledged that I would end the weaponization also of the Justice Department, and that America would once again have a one-tier system of justice for all. And that is what we are doing in this country.
We saw this with the president directing an investigation prosecution of Chris Krebs, the former head of cybersecurity, Lisa Cook, who is a current governor of the Federal Reserve, Director Comey. And the president, and I know you have said that you will not discuss discussions you've had with the president about Comey. Is that correct? That you won't testify here about that? Because I was going to ask you if you received advice, instruction, or request from anyone at the White House to direct the department to engage in any investigations, prosecutorial actions, including decisions not to investigate or prosecute anyone.
I'm not going to discuss any conversations.
But then how about the Truth Social post on September 20th, 2025, in which the president said, we can't delay any longer, Pam, using your name, not bringing criminal charges, are killing our reputation, his words, and credibility. And then goes on to tell you to prosecute a member of this committee, to prosecute the Attorney General of New York, and to prosecute James Comey. Do you consider that a directive to the Justice Department?
Senator Klobuchar, President Trump is the most transparent president in American history, and I don't think he said anything that he hasn't said for years.
Okay, it has been reported that you initially pushed back against requests by senior Trump administration officials to push out or fire the acting U.S. Attorney in Virginia, Eric Siebert, who's a conservative Republican, who made the decision that the evidence was not there to prosecute Comey. What made you change your opinion?
I am not going to discuss personnel decisions.
Okay. Is it true that the career prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia found that there was insufficient evidence to bring criminal charges against former Director Comey?
I am not going to discuss pending cases because Comey was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia by, I may point out, one of the most liberal grand juries in the country.
Okay, let's go on to other firings or terminations. Last week, the Justice Department fired at least 2 senior attorneys in the Eastern District of Virginia, including the office's national security chief, Michael Benary. It is reported that his firing came following criticism from a right-wing social media commentator who wrote, "One can only assume he was part of the internal resistance in the Comey indictment." In fact, he did not work on the Comey case. Instead, he was working on pursuing justice for service members killed in Afghanistan. How does firing a 20-year national security prosecutor enhance public safety?
Senator Klobuchar, I'm not going to discuss personnel decisions, but the personnel issue that I'm having right now is that all of my agents, all of my lawyers are working. My agents are on the street working without a paycheck because your party voted to shut down the federal government.
Unfortunately, the House isn't even back here. They're 18 days off the job to even meet with us to come up with a resolution that we would like to discuss with them about saving people's health care. Let's move on to the Antitrust Division. Did you authorize your chief of staff to overrule top officials in the Antitrust Division to settle the challenge to the Hewlett-Packard Enterprises Juniper Networks merger?
Senator Gail Slater runs my antitrust unit, and she is doing an excellent job on many, many cases. As you know, that is a pending case.
Okay.
In any merger, just to clarify, in any merger, Senator, there is a deal struck with our office and with the corporations involved, but then that also goes to a court to certify in any merger. In any merger, it's a multi-step process.
Okay, I
and
will
that
ask some
process
further
is still pending,
questions
Senator
about
Klobuchar.
antitrust. I just had one other thing. DOJ can now take the extraordinary step of subpoenaing
expired.
journalists. Has the Justice Department issued any subpoenas to journalists under the updated guidance?
What we just watched in that exchange was more than an interrogation. It was a civics lesson with a human heartbeat. Klobuchar shifted deliberately to a structural problem, the independence of the Justice Department. That's the central issue in this exchange. An attorney general can be a reformer, a partisan, or an institution builder, but the office has one non-negotiable duty in a republic: to ensure prosecutions and investigations follow the law and the facts, not the personal whims of elected officials. Klobuchar's line of questioning forces viewers to understand what that independence looks like in practice and why it's fragile. There are 3 practical layers to unpack so viewers learn something new, not just relive the drama. First, why a president publicly urging prosecutions is a constitutional problem. When the president uses a public platform to name individuals and demand prosecutions, it creates 2 immediate harms. 1, it telegraphs political expectations to career prosecutors who value their jobs and pensions. That pressure can chill independent judgment. 2, it sends a signal to the public that decisions may be made for partisan advantage rather than legal merit, which corrodes trust. The DOJ's legitimacy rests on perceived neutrality. If people believe prosecutions are politically directed, juries, witnesses, and communities lose faith in the process. Klobuchar's question about a public post was not a gotcha, it was a request to protect that neutrality. Second, the limits and responsibilities of senior DOJ leaders. Bondi repeatedly refused to discuss personnel decisions, pending cases, or private conversations. Some of those refusals are legally required. There are real rules about commenting on pending prosecution or personnel privacy. But institutional responsibility isn't erased by procedural lines. Leadership means explaining the mechanism for independence, how cases are screened, how recusal decisions are made, how the chain of command protects career prosecutors who disagree with political leadership. When a leader declines to describe safeguards, the practical effect is opacity. Viewers should learn that transparency is not about airing secrets, it's about explaining the guardrails that make impartial justice possible. Third, the downstream effects of politicized personnel moves. Klobuchar referenced firings in the Eastern District of Virginia, senior career prosecutors removed after public pressure. There's an important distinction between legitimate personnel realignment and punitive removals aimed at reshaping case outcomes. Career prosecutors with 20 years of national security experience don't exist in a vacuum. They hold institutional knowledge, witness relationships, case continuity. Removing them abruptly can slow or derail investigations, create institutional memory gaps, and deter other career staff from pursuing controversial or politically sensitive lines of inquiry. That isn't a hypothetical. It's how prosecutions lose momentum and how accountability becomes harder. Beyond mechanics, there's a human story here about trust and trauma. Klobuchar framed questions around violence and victims. The reason that matters is simple. When the justice system is perceived as skewed, victims and witnesses, already traumatized, are less likely to come forward. A DOJ that appears to pick and choose who to prosecute undermines the very incentive structures that produce evidence, cooperation, witness testimony, and interagency referrals. That loss of cooperation is not theoretical. It results in fewer convictions and more unresolved harm, which in turn fuels cynicism and fear in communities. There are also concrete institutional remedies and democratic guardrails the public should understand. Oversight hearings matter because they create a public record, transcripts, answers, and refusals that civil society groups, IGs, and federal watchdogs can use. The Inspector General can audit patterns of hiring, firing, and case allocation. Congress can require written explanations and appoint independent special counsels when conflicts are credible. The courts can review abusive dismissals or unconstitutional directives. These are not magical cures, but they are the practical toolkit democracy uses when the executive branch overreaches. Klobuchar's questioning is part of that toolkit. It starts the paper trail. Finally, there is an ethical argument about leadership that Klobuchar made without shouting. An attorney general's highest duty is to the rule of law, not to a president's personal vendettas. That ethical posture has consequences. If DOJ leaders model independence by publicly clarifying recusal policies, by defending career prosecutors who follow the facts, and by committing to transparent explanations of personnel decisions, they rebuild public trust. If leaders instead respond with evasions or tweet-ready quips, they make the public conversation about theatrical politics rather than remedial law. So where does that leave the viewer who wants to act, not merely observe? Start small and practical. Ask your representatives whether they support measures that strengthen DOJ independence, statutory protections for career prosecutors, clearer recusal policies, funding for inspector general audits, and rules limiting public pressure on pending investigations. Support journalism and watchdog groups that document personnel changes and case outcomes. When hearings like this occur, read the transcript, not the hot takes, and ask which questions were answered and which were deferred. Finally, measure rhetoric against structure. Bold words about independence mean nothing unless accompanied by institutional reforms and transparent practices. This exchange was more than a moment headline editors could package. It was a deliberate lesson in how institutional norms either protect or erode liberty. Amy Klobuchar used grief to humanize the stakes and then used procedural pressure to demand accountability. That combination, humanity plus institutional rigor, is precisely what preserves a fair justice system. If you care about a DOJ that follows facts and law rather than faction, that's the posture to insist upon. Protect the guardrails, invest in transparency, and hold leaders accountable when they fail to explain how they're keeping the system impartial. If you believe the rule of law matters, don't let this hearing end as a viral clip. Contact your senator, ask for specific oversight steps, follow Inspector General reports, and support public interest groups that track DOJ independence. Democracy depends not on one day of outrage, but on persistent insistence that institutions work for everyone, not just the politically powerful.